Recognize that several of you have joined us tonight to hear Stan Deyo, and Stan is scheduled to join us in about 3 minutes' time, and I know that he will be there. If you are new to the program, thank you very much for being here. We are a ministry. We're on each weeknight from 7 to 11 Central Time, and we're here to encourage believers. We serve up meat, and we take on hard issues every night. We look at the geopoliticals. We look at the spiritual. We look at the so-called Christian X-Files. You name it, we take it on from a Christian worldview, unabashedly, believing that financial collapse is imminent, as is the return of Christ. If you read Matthew 24 and you read the headlines, it's not hard to have them kind of get confused in your mind as to which is the Bible and which is the news headline. It's that close. It's that close. Is it tomorrow? Probably not. Is it like this guy marching around, is it in Tennessee saying it's the 21st of May? Probably not. But is it within my lifetime? I'm pretty sure, unless I only have a couple more days to live, I'm pretty sure, yeah, it is going to happen in my lifetime. And so we're here to encourage the body of believers. We're unabashedly Christian, and we're not interested in debating the existence of Jesus Christ. That's a fact. We're not interested in debating whether or not he's coming back. That's a fact. We're not interested in debating the authenticity of the Bible. That's a fact. If you want to debate that, there's other shows out there. That's not going to happen here. I'm not being belligerent. I'm just not interested in getting into those kind of arguments with people. Can I make a very good argument for my faith? Yeah, but I don't want to get slowed down with that. We're busy providing a place where Christians can be encouraged and excited about their faith. There's no question we're heading into the end times, but it's like the kid who's going to Disneyland in a couple of days. He's too excited to sleep. We're most likely going to see the return of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's something to get excited about. That's something, it's okay. I mean, in the world right now, they beat you down, they laugh at you, they mock. Not here. Not here. This is a place where we encourage you to stand up for Jesus. And don't be afraid to stand up for Christ, because we're there with you. If you're not in the chat page, if you're not on our website, get on to crossing-the-world.com. When you click on the viewer underneath, you'll see the funny little icon, chat page. Click on that, and you're there. And there's a great number of folks in there carrying on some really, really good conversations right now. So I encourage you to join with them. I'm following as best as I'm able, and if there are questions out of the chat room for Stan, we'll do everything we can to pass those on for you. Beyond that, if it's easier for you to email me, it's VDJ. My name is Vincent David Jericho. VDJ at crossing-the-world.com. And if you prefer, you can also hit me at crossingtheworldforchrist@gmail.com. Good evening. You're on Crossing the World.
Am I?
You are.
Well, this is Stan Deyo calling in for Vince.
Stan who? I'm teasing
Deyo.
you. I'm teasing you, Stan. It's Vince. Welcome to the program. How you doing?
Oh, good. Sorry, I didn't recognize your voice. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Is that better?
Are you, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're on live. I'm just giving you a hard time, but we can hear you fine,
Oh,
Stan.
okay.
Yeah, we can hear you fine. I'm just being a silly fool, but can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. Okay, yep. I'm just uploading some stuff here to the website, some images we can talk about. Some things are happening at the moment with earthquake.
Okay. You're good to go?
All righty.
Cool.
Good to go.
All righty. Well, we have the usual cast of thousands that are excited to have Stan here. I don't know if much of an introduction is needed. I know that the majority of you that are here, Stan is well known to you, and you may not know him personally, but he is like a friend. He has got such a warm and congenial personality. He's always been so very gracious to me. Of course, he's worked in the government. He's worked undercover for the FBI. He is the consummate Renaissance man. He's done everything from an amateur archaeologist to a physicist. I believe you hold several patents, don't you, if memory serves?
Yeah, I applied for one they rejected, and I applied. I was going to apply for another one, and I just gave up on it because they got such loose lips there at the patent office these days, and passing over to China that I figured it was better just to keep it secret and develop it privately, and
Understood.
So no, there's none been granted. I tell you what, though, it's interesting. I made the application, which they denied. They didn't like it, the circuit, and suddenly it appeared on the internet everywhere. So you got to wonder why they released my patent
surprise.
They shouldn't have.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting, Stan. There's a few things that we had talked about before you came on the program tonight as far as, what all are we going to talk about? We're going to get to earthquakes and all that good stuff. But something that you had thrown at me that I've done enough research on to be absolutely dangerous on now, and that is you've been working on a propulsion system, and I've been reading about this and going, wow, this is freaking me out. If this is what I understand it to be, entrainment propulsion. And I was reading about things being in phase and out of phase and trying to get a handle on entrainment propulsion. And I think I remember hearing or reading about a Nazi scientist who was working on something very similar to this as well. So let's start right in with something that I know is really near and dear to your heart and something you're kind of excited about. First off, explain entrainment propulsion, and did I understand what I think I understood?
Well, I'll explain. I don't know what you thought you understood. But,
I'll lie regardless. I'm going to lie. I'm going to lie and say I did. So it's okay. Go ahead.
All right. The Nazi physicist you're talking about, was that Schauberger you're thinking about?
Thank you. Yes.
Victor Schauberger?
Yes, thank you.
He was Austrian, and they impressed him into service. Of the Nazis. He wasn't happy about it, but he was an interesting fellow that did the first experiments that I know of, anyway, that are public, other than Nikola Tesla's work on it, about entraining fluids. Schauberger was a ranger, a forest ranger in Austria. And he spent, a number of years in that job. And one of the things he liked to do was to go down to a local waterfall in the hills there and watch the behavior of the trout, the brown trout, which is much akin to the salmon here in the northern hemisphere or in North America. The thing that he found amazing was that he could watch the fish. The water was so clear he could see them, and they would stand almost perfectly still while the stream went right past them, but they didn't move. I mean, right over them, and they were just sitting there. Now, how did that happen, he said. And then he noticed that there would be, some of them would go up toward the waterfall and would swim right up to the base of where it's hitting the river and would spin around in these kind of weird gyrations for a second, this way, that way, and stretch upward like it's trying to climb up the waterfall, and then suddenly it'd go real stiff with a kind of an odd curl to its body, and then it would spin around and go straight up the waterfall and over the top of it without moving. It was being moved by the water. So to solve this, he spent many years studying and pondering on it, and he eventually devised a thing called the repulsion, which is a kind of a dumbbell or flying saucer type shape, which utilized the fluid flows that he saw and determined in those fish. And I've reproduced that, actually. I've even done the fish, in a 3D animation program and put it into the final edition of the Cosmic Conspiracy book. I did that last year. And in there I show what Schauberger saw the fish do and how the water moved around the fish to form like a field of spinning water around the fish. And that field of water then created a vacuum over the top of the fish and pulled it straight up the waterfall over the top. And a number of salmon do that here in the northern hemisphere or in the northern North America as well when they're swimming upstream and up over these waterfalls.
Right.
They don't have to swim hard. They shape their body in a certain way and the water flows through the mouth, their gills, and it reflects off of their tail and forms this kind of inverse tornado and sucks them right up. Now, tonight's show, Holly's got it up on our website. Right next to Crossing the World, it says Show Images. And if you'll look there and down about 6 rows down, you'll see an odd-looking thing, and it's called the anatomy of a via smoke ring. And this is what I'm going to talk about. It's entrainment propulsion.
Okay.
And this smoke ring is part of a thing that I was going to have in a patent, which I withheld from the patent office because it was so leaky. Entrainment means to catch surrounding water or air with a moving stream of some sort and bring it along with you. To give you an example, if you blow smoke, inhale and blow smoke out in front of you, and you're in a room where you can see the light on the smoke, you'll see that as you blow the smoke out, clear air comes around to the sides and gets caught up and dragged along with the smoke you've blown out, and then mixed in with it and distributed it, and eventually the room has a bunch of little curls here and there, and everything goes still again. So entrainment means to bring along with the propulsion field that you're using. One of the most simple ways to see this propulsion, to visualize it, is to get into a room where you can blow cigar smoke and blow a smoke ring. We either use a Coke bottle where you hit the bottom of it and blow the smoke out of it, or whether if you can blow smoke rings, you do it. Well, if you study the smoke ring, you'll be studying like Schauberger did of the fish. What makes a smoke ring work? Now, on the images I've got there, I've got a picture of the smoke ring, and if you click on it, it goes to a bigger picture. I'm doing that now as I speak. And this is a cutaway of what happens inside of a smoke ring. Now, a lot of people think, okay, the smoke just forms a little donut and goes shooting off, and, big deal, everybody knows how that works. But what they haven't realized is that that is not a spinning donut. It is a warp or a bend in the air. And the air that you blow out in that smoke ring forms a thin shell that bends back, all the way down into the center of that donut, and then turns around and comes back out through the back end of the donut. And this is in the drawing there. It's like if you take a carpet that's loose on the floor, and you get to one side, and you pick the carpet up, and you generate you lift it up and down real quick to make a wave go across. Well, if you did it fast enough, and the carpet was elastic enough, it would form a smoke ring or half of one on the carpet as well.
Right.
It unwinds, and what I found is when I would artificially shoot a smoke ring across the lab, we filmed it in slow motion, is the smoke would come out of the bottle, and it would come out in a very thin film that would bend around, and the smoke ring would head off toward the other side of the lab, and pretty soon it would disappear before it hit the other side. And yet we put targets up, and that smoke ring still had force and meaning, and it would knock things over on the other side of the lab, even though it was invisible now. But laying in the air behind it was this thin, long tube of the smoke, the original smoke.
Sure.
And it was a clue to us. Okay, the smoke that came out is being constantly exchanged with the air in front, the clean air. And so eventually all the smoke in that smoke ring disappears, but the inertia, the strength of it there, is still there. Now, that's entrainment. That is where the clear air is caught up into the force field and recirculated in and helps that ring to move ahead. To give you an idea how efficient this is, entrainment propulsion, if you were to be in that same lab about 30 foot across, and you were to put up, a cigarette box, a package of cigarettes, and you were to go over to the other side of the room and blow as hard as you want, would you be able to blow over that cigarette box?
Probably not. Probably not. People have said I'm a windbag stand, but I don't think I got that much.
I like it. Yeah. Well, I tried it, and I couldn't make windbag status either.
Yeah.
But with the same amount of energy, if I turn that energy into a smoke ring of air, I can shoot that air donut across the room at the cigarette pack at 90 miles an hour.
Wow. With
just a Coke bottle pressing on the back of it. And it will knock over the cigarette box. Now, that means you've taken all that energy, instead of letting it be just absorbed by the air around you, you've directed it. You've made it a packet, and it goes over and performs its duty on the other side of the room and knocks the target over. Atoms, light, all these things are similar type phenomena related to this smoke ring thing in various relationships. This is why the scientists have trouble saying that light is either a wave or a particle. Why? Because it is like a donut, a torus, and it has frequency because it spins. But I've made movies of these things where I've shot these donuts at each other, and they will bounce off each other like atoms or like electromagnetic radiation does. I've bounced it off of tables. It becomes like a solid particle when you spin it real fast like that. Now, what's the value of this? To get across that room and hit the target, we have used much less energy than would be necessary if you were to take an air hose and 200 pounds per square inch and try to blow across the room through all the turbulence and stuff you create to hit and knock over that cigarette box or packet. It's an efficient way to use a small amount of energy to get you, your craft, from point A to point B. The reason is, when you're going forward, if you pulse air or water or even fields ahead of you real fast, they will curl around behind you and come into the intakes. They'll come into the intakes of your engine, and so the drag that would normally be a problem comes back around the back of the craft and helps you scoot forward. And if you only get 10% of your weight, your drag, back into the intakes, that's 10% this pulse, and then that's 11% or more the next time, and it keeps adding up as you go through the medium. So it's a very clever way to do it, and it doesn't leave like a shock wave. You can break the sound barrier in a craft designed like this, and you'll never hear a clap or a boom or anything. It'll just go right on through.
Well, aside from,
I've also filmed it.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, aside from Stan Deyo, is anybody working on this, or are you working on this to bring it to market, so to speak, in the form of some sort of get in and drive to work or drive to my Aunt Betsy's place?
You're breaking up. Can you tell me that again, or ask me that again?
I'm sorry. Are you working on something that I can get into and drive to my Aunt Betsy's house or drive to work in? I mean, how close are we to taking this from the theoretical to, hey, I can go down to my local dealership and buy one of these?
Well, some of the theory I've already passed on to various people making surfboards and making racing yachts. Whether they've been used yet, I don't think so yet. But with racing yachts, using this theory or this method of propulsion, I determined that you could scoop out on the hull kind of egg-shaped impressions at certain spacings and sized for the size of the boat. And what happens is, as the racing yacht breaks water, comes up into the air and comes back down, it will trap an air bubble in all these little dimples on the bottom of the boat. And that air bubble will spin around as the water comes past it. And because of the shape of the dimple, that some of that water will curl back up inside and back around and become like a water-air bearing. And it reduces the drag on that boat like immensely, and so also on surfboards. I designed a number of things also for the auto industry to look at, but as yet I haven't gotten them to bite at it. So I'm doing the testing and developing on my own here. I'm working on an aircraft right now, which is a model aircraft. It's about 21 inches in diameter, sitting on the shelf there across from me. And I'm going to power it with a little electric motor, about half a horsepower, and some batteries, and use the same kind of entrainment propulsion just to show the theory. We're in a bad market for investment.
Yeah.
There just aren't investors running around saying, "Look, I want to give you $2 million. Go make us a flying saucer or a better car," or this kind of stuff. Now, I will say this: using dimples, or not dimples so much, but a scoop arrangement on vehicles for cars, it will reduce the drag over 50 miles an hour. It will reduce your drag and fuel consumption noticeably, very much so, in fact. But it will change the aesthetic appearance of the car. And this may be one of the reasons I'm going to have trouble selling it to the car manufacturers, at this point anyway. Mm-hmm. I mean, imagine if we took the yacht version and made the skin of the car have a bunch of golf ball dimples all over it, it'd look very kind of dimply, like a golf ball on wheels. Who wants to drive a car like that?
Well,
so it's a balance between aesthetics
sure.
and efficiency.
Volkswagen made a lot of money by selling ugly cars, and maybe I'm excited, and I pray that this does come to pass for you, Stan, because I understand it. I'm not a physicist, but I do understand the basics behind this, and I really do lift you up in prayer and pray that the Lord will lead you in the right path. I just want to get one thing in real quick. Because of issues between us and AT&T, it's impossible for me to show the images that Stan's talking about. Otherwise, I'm going to lose my connection to Ustream. Believe me, AT&T knows my name. That being said, while Stan and I are chatting, if you want to go to Stan's website, StanDeyo, DEYO.com, you'll see right on the top, Stan guests on Vincent Jericho's Crossing the World, and then you'll see Show Images. Click on that and have that open in one of your windows while you're listening to us, and that way you can keep up with Stan and the different images that he's alluding to. You'll be able to go to them yourselves while we're talking here tonight. So I just want to make sure I got that in, Stan.
It's a good point. Good point.
Well,
in fact, Holly's going to leave it up there next to your show thing, even when we go to archives and people look at it later.
Thank you.
It will be on the website for some time.
Great. Now, I know another thing that you're working on, and given that I'm wanting to be off the grid if at all possible, you're looking and looking at what's happening at Libya and the Middle East. You're also looking at different ways to provide cheap power. How's that going?
Right. Well, it's slow. It's kind of one of those things that I do in between building a flying saucer here to actually work and doing my normal real-world job here in the company business of publishing and stuff, and writing another paper on gravity and handling 100 people at the moment in 17 countries that are doing research tests for us on changes in gravity. So having said that, I am working on it as best I can, and I've actually gotten to the point of putting 6 foundation poles out in the backyard in the shape I need to hold the antenna array for the test. But I'll explain where the energy is and how to basically convert it to electricity so we can use it. Energy is all around us. Atoms spin and move, and photons zip around. I mean, it's just all around us. Anything above absolute zero has got energy. It's converting that motion in some fashion to the flow of electrons is giving you what a lot of people refer to as free electricity. Nothing is free, but it's very, 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 very cheap. And it's abundant, and it doesn't pollute, and it's constantly replenished. So, 2 sources. Atoms, as we know it around us here on the Earth and our solar system, atoms of all kinds, whether they be lead or oxygen or nitrogen, whatever, atoms exchange energy between themselves. An atom only lives about a millionth of a second or so, and it disappears. And you have to ask yourself, well, why doesn't my table disintegrate and fall apart after a few minutes if all the atoms are dying? The answer is, although an atom only lives for that millionth of a second or so, when it breaks up, it throws out circular spherical waves at a certain frequency as it dies. And atoms around it that are of the same atomic weight, same structure, will absorb that as spin, and that will spin them up and save them, and it'll be a food for them in essence. So this goes on all the time. Over a long period of time, your desk will kind of get tired and sag, and even granite pours slowly. Einstein showed that. So that energy that goes between atoms, though, occurs in an infrared spectrum, in a kind of a narrow bandwidth in the infrared spectrum. Now, that's the frequency range of what this energy is exchanged back and forth. If you can intercept that frequency, that energy is going in all different directions, if you can intercept that and cause that to make an electron flow somewhere, then you can convert the motion of the energy coming off of that dying atom, or exchanging atom, because they exchange even though they don't die. You can convert that motion to electricity, and all you do is take heat energy, in essence, out of all the atoms around you. Now, that's one source. I'll tell you about how to do that in a minute. That's one source. The other source is fairly stable and reliable in our solar system, and in fact in any stellar system. When you have a star that is throwing off what we call solar wind or stellar wind, it's throwing off protons and it's emitting photons. It's spinning off energy all the time. Now, on Earth, that's called the solar wind when it hits us. And it hits our outer magnetic fields in the upper atmosphere, and it hits it with, let's say, kind of an average frequency of maybe 30 million times a second. It varies. It's like the waves of the ocean. Sometimes they'll be close together, sometimes they'll be far apart. Sometimes they'll be massive king super waves, and sometimes they'll just be pitty little ripples. Now, that impact is happening day and night. When we're on the dark side of the planet and the solar wind is hitting the lit side of the planet, it reduces the amount of shock or vibrations on the other side, the dark side of the planet, by about 25%. But it still can be felt and detected over on the dark side. So day and night, whether it's raining, whether the sun's shining or not, that kind of energy is a shock wave that you can convert into electricity. Now, the first guy that I know that did that was Dr. T. Henry Murray in Utah. He's just a really sharp fellow, and when he was 19 years old, he made his first discovery of that energy when he was living on his dad's farm, and he stretched a rubber insulated wire from the house over to the barn. And then he took one end of the wire, and he brought it in the house, and he found that sparks would jump off of it if he hooked that wire to a coil that was hooked to the ground, and then mechanically or manually make and break contact on it. At certain frequencies, he could get a lot of energy out of that, enough to eventually make sounds in a speaker. And he pursued that over the years as he got older and was able to make a circuit that would power a small transistor radio. And it was just out of the air. And this was not picking up radio waves from a nearby station or anything like that. He proved that point many times over. He went on to make a device about the size of 2 foot by 3 foot by 2 foot, and an antenna that was about 89 feet long, again, rubber insulated. It was stretched straight, just a wire between two poles, and back about 3/4 of the way from one end, he hooked another wire coming down, it's insulated, down to his box. And he could generate or convert up to 10,000 watts of power all day. At night, it was around 7,500 watts, but that's as low as it got. He had that thing locked up, tested, for 159 hours straight without anybody touching it, generating that kind of power. He had judges, he had doctors, he had engineers, all kinds of very reputable people sign documents, look inside the box, hold the components and say, this is what was in the box, and here's what was the result. We saw it, we touched it, it's real. Now, he was converting that stuff, but the tools he used to do it required the use of high voltage diode, like germanium, and he had about 500 of them made. They were about the size of a mayonnaise jar. And, melting down germanium, that much germanium, that was expensive. And they didn't always work. He didn't know why, but the guy he had casting these germanium diodes for him would cast a bunch before he'd get one that would work. Now, a friend of mine actually interviewed the guy that made the cells for him before he died, so that's how I know about this. The other thing he used was a little white stone that he got when he was visiting as a young fellow over in Sweden. And an ore car came by on the railway line and dropped some white ore down, which he thought, well, that's an unusual-looking ore, so he put it in his pocket and brought it home. Years later, when he was testing this for electrical conductivity, this white stone, he called it the Swedish stone, allowed him to make a circuit that would convert this pulsing of the solar wind straight into electricity. And that's how he was able to do that 10 kilowatts or 10,000 watt power supply. Now, that one to me seems to be the most readily accessible by the average person. The other one, where you're converting the infrared in between atoms as they pass energy back and forth, is a little more sophisticated and requiring a little more expense as far as generating certain parts of the circuit that will take the infrared energy and convert it straight to electricity. Now, the substance the magic substance that does that is called a triboluminescent element or compound. Remember the old days when TV had like green screens and black and white, and phosphor? Okay. That phosphor that coats the screen is a triboluminescent phosphor, usually something like zinc oxide or a sulfide of zinc. And an electron would be shot at it from the electron gun at the back of the TV tube. When that electron hit that triboluminescent material, it would emit light. And, of course, if you have a bunch of little dots like that, you form a picture and you have television. What people are not aware of is if you shine a light on that phosphor of the same frequency that it emits when it gets electron hit, if you shine a light on the phosphor, it will emit an electron out the other side. And that's called triboluminescence again. Now, or the inverse of that. So, now, if you want to capture the energy between the atoms, if you have a cylinder, like a pipe that's hollow, and it's sealed on the top and the bottom so that it's, got a controlled low-pressure atmosphere, and you coat the inside of it with this phosphor like was on the TV tubes, but not quite the same. It's a phosphor that's not reacting to visible light, but to infrared light in the frequency band that is where the atoms exchange energy. And then you could take that cylinder in your hand, and the heat of your body would produce energy in the infrared spectrum. That coated, doped material on the inside would say, heat, let's turn it into electricity. And it will build up a charge inside that tube. Now, the way that you can trap that is to then, is before you heat up that tube with your hand or whatever, put a wire up the middle of it, and that wire is hooked up to another little circuit, and you start electrons flowing back and forth between the wall of that pipe and the wire in the center, back and forth, and you tune it so that the waves become standing waves. Now then, if you grab it with your hand and the heat is converted to electrons on the outside of that tube, they will piggyback onto the already existing wave you've set up and raise its voltage. And by raising its voltage like that, then it will make it high enough voltage in a few seconds to create a spark if you've got a little arc gap somewhere outside that circuit. And once that happens, you can trap that energy and turn it into, stuff to run your house or your car, whatever. Now, it's a little trickier, and we've got to have that special compound that reacts in that infrared frequency. Now, I don't know what that is yet. I've looked at it and done a bit of research on how we might be able to create that, but that's why I put that in a little bit too difficult category right now. What we want to do is this simpler thing that T. Henry Murray did, and that was to let the shock waves that come from the solar wind particles bombarding the Earth, let those be pressing on our antenna and causing it to emit high voltage. Now, what people don't realize as a general rule is that if you hang a wire in the air with insulators so that it can't short out to ground and wrap some rubber or insulating material around it, if you put a little probe from a oscilloscope so you can see voltage changes on that wire without touching it, if you hang a little probe up close to it, you will see that periodically there will be a 100,000 volt spike come out of that wire, or maybe a 10,000 or a minus 15,000, but high voltage sparks actually coming between the atoms in that wire, just sitting there doing nothing. It's not even controlled. So they don't know why, they say officially, but it does happen. It's spontaneous electron emission from this wire hanging there. What Morey did was he insulated that wire. He put a charge on it, a direct current charge, a high voltage charge, about 20,000 volts. And I know this because of the papers that he wrote that I've read, and the photographs which show people holding his antenna wire, the short one, in their hand. They hold one end of it, but they use one of these glass insulators, like are on the high voltage lines, so they don't touch the end of it because it's got a charge on it. And it puts this physical field around it. When you've been to a Van de Graaff generator to some show at the Science Center, your hair stands out. You can feel that kind of presence of the electron. That field extends way out around the antenna wire. And it's very sensitive to motion. I mean, even if you move your hand, I can see it on an oscilloscope. If you move your hand on a charged wire like that, up 3-4 feet away, even further, I can see the movement you make in a ripple in the charge on that wire. So what he said was, okay, we'll charge up this wire. We'll hook up a wire down to connect it, an insulated wire again, down to our little circuit box down here. And we will put a spark onto that wire, a pulse, bang, and we'll ring that wire so that whatever its natural ring frequency is, mechanically, it will temporarily ring. Now, that means that any of the charges or the pressures being put on that field by the atmosphere, and hence the solar wind, will react and cause voltage to rise periodically very high for a fraction of a second, around a 30 millionth of a second on average. Now, what you do is when that raises the voltage on your antenna wire, you have that wire coming down into your little box, and the simplified explanation is that at the end of the wire in your box, an arc jumps over a little arc gap you've got and into the circuit that you've got that converts it to usable electricity.
Sure.
And that's what he was working with. Now, that one, to me, seems to be the most practical, even though it's high voltage and it's a little dangerous. People could be taught how to use that without, endangering themselves. So that one is the one I'm concentrating on at the moment. I'm also, in my spare moments when I'm driving down the street or something, thinking about a third way, and that is even simpler yet, and that is taking some metal foil, alfoil, aluminum foil, and a polypropylene pipe or sheet, and setting it up so the wind blows across that and generates a charge that you convert through a step-down transformer into a battery. We used to do something similar to that when I was a teenager. You could charge a motorcycle bike up in about 2 days using an insulated antenna like that, and a spark gap, and a diode to trap the electricity once it gets onto your antenna. And you could charge up your motorcycle battery over a couple of days. That's not really efficient to run a house, but you can see the energy is there, and
Sure.
It's been used over decades. So those are the three sources of energy that I think we could use safely. And when I say I think we could, I know we can, because the group that I was recruited by down in Australia, Dr. Keller's group, they already had devices like that, and they didn't want to share this with the world. This is one of the reasons that I got really irritated with them. We had a severe parting of the ways, as I thought in my ignorance at the time that, okay, look, let's take it to India, let's take it to Africa, and let's get these villages that don't have enough water. Let's use this kind of a device, get them water, fresh water, and let them have industry and life, And they said, no, that's not the way the global plan is going. We want them to have natural attrition. In other words, they don't want to help them. They want them to just overbreed and die.
Sure.
And that's where we parted ways. I knew there had to be a friendlier way to do this somehow.
The depopulation of the world.
But anyway, that's why you don't have it.
Stan Deyo is our guest, and as you are surmising very quickly, he is brilliant, and it is such a privilege and an honor to have Stan with us. Now, if this is your first time on the program, we're here every night, 4 hours, 7 to 11 Central Time, and we're a place to encourage Christians. This is a place where we serve meat. This is a place where we say it's okay to be excited about the Lord Jesus Christ, because He's coming back soon, and there is there is so much to be excited about. I will make only one crass commercial announcement, and that is we are a ministry. You'll see the donate button on our website. If you see your way fit and you're able to subscribe to us at $10 a month, thank you. If you want to make a one-time donation, thank you. If you're not in a position where you can help us financially, please bring a friend, because as we grow and reach critical mass, the other thing that we're going to be able to do is sell advertising. So between donations and selling advertising, we're actually going to be able to survive. The Lord has provided, and I'm just throwing it out at you folks. Pray about it, and if you can help us, bless you and thank you. Stay